Welcome to ISE EXPO 2018. I'm Sharon Volman, Editorial Director of ISE Magazine, and we're so happy to have you here to continue your professional development in this crazy, intense, wild industry. I'm excited to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Jack Waters, who is CTO and President of Fiber Solutions at Zayo. But first, before we get started with that, I want to make sure you guys know how to get involved in the experience. While Jack is talking, please text your questions to us at 240-473-3976. I'll be taking the questions, and then after his presentation, we will take them together and he will answer your questions. We may not be able to get to all of them, but we will do our best. Now let me tell you a little bit about Jack. Jack Waters is CTO and President of Fiber Solutions at Zayo. In his role, he oversees global technology and fiber solution strategy and execution, He's also involved in all aspects of the business and is directly engaged with Zayo's strategic customers, technology partners, and alliance partners. Prior to joining Zayo, Jack was CTO at Level 3, where he was focused on global network engineering, technology, architecture, and also engineering processes and security. He joined Level 3 in 1997 and has held numerous leadership positions spanning global operations and engineering. And with that, please help me welcome Jack. Thank you.
Good morning. Come on, good morning. So, I got to do this real quick. Could you turn the lights up just a little bit? Can you guys stand up, please? Everybody stand up? Everybody stand up? All right. All right, make a little noise. All right, all right. I wanted to get on record what I think is the longest or the largest congregation of people responsible for America's traffic jams in one room. So I thought that would be good. So as Sharon mentioned, I've actually been at Zayo for 2 years as of today. So this is my 2-year anniversary at the company, so thank you, my Zayo friends. Prior to that, I spent 19 years or so at what was a small little startup with about 8 people, a few of them in the room here, that became Level 3 and did a lot of stuff there. I'm going to take you a little bit through history and then hopefully get to the point of why we're all here. So with that, I will jump in. So 20 years. The Broncos, huh? How many Denver folks? Yeah? Remember that? How many people worked for Level 3 in January of 1998? I saw at least one person. There's a few. And Mike Ryan is up here. Do you guys remember what we were doing at that time? We brought 200 or so people and their significant others to Denver to announce that we were going to locate our office here in Denver. Hence the beginning of, now the Quest folks might argue with this, the beginning of competitive telecom here in Denver, at least real competitive telecom. So with that, a couple other kind of 20 years ago, Google was founded. A couple of Stanford guys. Anybody know who Andy Bechtolsheim is? Andy Bechtolsheim was the guy who gave Sergey and Larry 100 grand to start Google. Turns out Andy's a pretty rich guy right now. That worked out. That's worth a few billion or so. And then the .com, everyone's going to get rich. I think it's probably the greatest influx of capital in modern history. I don't know the exact number, but way in the hundreds of billions of dollars invested in tech at that time. How many people, be honest, had an AOL account? Come on, be honest. Now it's kind of hard to look at this slide and say, my God, AOL, Yahoo, that's Verizon. Google has flourished. And we did this really interesting thing back then, probably the most technologically advanced thing ever. we decided that putting plastic pipes in the ground might make sense, rather than dig up the ground once, throw in the cable, and then cover it back up. Turns out that the incremental cost of adding plastic pipes in the ground is a really good investment. In fact, way back when, we decided we would put 12 conduits in the ground. Why didn't we put 13 in? We couldn't find something big enough to put 13 in. If we could have, we probably would have. Now, you could argue whether that's way ahead of its time or not. We'll see. Only time will tell. And at that time, the fiber network build was in full swing. You'll remember a few of these companies, many of which have been consolidated by one or the other. Level 3 had its original build. Everybody remember 360's networks? 360 was started from Leadcore, Canadian construction company. The Williams guys, the Williams gas pipeline guys, decided to get into communication. They decided to build their network along the gas pipelines. Remember them? The Quest folks had started in '94, mostly around the railroads. And the Broadwing folks have built a pretty decent network. It's kind of hard, it's funny to look at that. I still look at this map and say, my gosh, that was 20 years ago. We didn't know who was going to win. We still don't know who won. The interesting thing about this was when we think about the build that happened 20 years ago, I think a lot that we only talk about that inner city thing. And we weren't talking a lot about metro networks at the time. And if we built metro networks, many of us did, the metro networks were built just to get from that long haul point, that long haul gateway, into a city to a handful of places that mattered. And then the bubble burst. Now I got to tell you a story about my mom. So explaining to your mom what you do is always hard. I think we all struggle with it, you know. So when I left what would be my forever job at MCI, or so I thought, think about that. MCI went bankrupt. I used to tell my mom, hey, I'm going to work for a construction company. But the construction company is going to be a telecom company. And so through the bubble, my mom would tell all her friends, hey, he's working for a construction company, but it's going to be a telecom company. And then the bubble burst. And then she just ran around and told everybody he was working at a construction company. So at that same time, hey, look, I'm an engineer. That's as good as the jokes get, so, you know, you guys got to realize that. At that time, Cisco lost 87% of its market cap. Amazon went from 107 to $7 a share, Amazon. It's worth today almost $920 billion. And believe it or not, I know this is hard to believe, but Pets.com went bankrupt. Seriously. And as you kind of went through the mid-2000s, this was the belief. Today, researchers estimate that about 85% of the fiber lines, clearly a reporter that's in the know calling them fiber lines, in the ground in the US still are dark or inactive. Even the fiber that is being used isn't close to having its full capacity exploited. I don't know if I fully agreed with that comment then, nor do I agree with it now, but I certainly think the sentiment was right, that the build-out was ahead of its time. This incredible influx of capital ran into telecom and technology, and there was no doubt that we all who were there were ahead of our times. And then the Great Recession. And you know, as I was putting this together, I got to admit, I lived my life, as many in the room did, during this time as a professional. I didn't realize it was only 6 years between the bubble bursting and the Great Recession. So if you got burnt in technology and telecom, decided, hey, I'm going to take all that money and invest it in real estate, woo, that didn't work out. So right around that same time, not me, but a bunch of really smart folks, Dan Caruso and a few others, had looked at the market and said, you know, there are all kinds of fiber businesses that have made it through the bubble bursting and actually have pretty decent businesses. But they were small fiber orphans, if you will, sitting in small markets, had really nice businesses in and of themselves, but probably were going to struggle to flourish without a bigger platform. And that was the fundamental thesis of Zayo and the investment that Zayo made in telecom. It turns out that that is the first office up and to the right. I'm embarrassed to say that Dan points out to me that was over the Nick and Willie's Pizza on West Pearl in Boulder. So demand. So as we kind of get through the recession, Zayo starts, you look at, all right, is there any reason to like telecom anymore? Is there any fundamental thing happening? And luckily, there were a couple. And I don't think you can overstate the impact that the iPhone had on our industry. When you think about the device that really did change everything, it really was the iPhone, and it made accessible to all of us as individuals an incredible device that had great compute power, that changed the interface. I mean, think about it. The induction in my finger touching a piece of glass that has a mesh of wires underneath the glass, and suddenly I can navigate like I've never been able to navigate on any device before. All that technology was there in the first iPhone. It was a really fantastic leap forward in technology. Now, how many people owned an Android Dream in 2008? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we don't need to turn on the lights for that one. It turns out that Android had a bit of a slow start, but Android today has 80% market share in mobile devices. So when you look at, we often quote the iPhone and say what happened and how successful the iPhone was, but in fact, Android has done an incredible job as well. Lots of other things happening at this time. Amazon had been in business for quite a while, but certainly changed the way e-commerce was happening, changed the way we were buying books, PayPal, eBay. And the important thing that I think as you look at kind of 2008, 9, and 10 is that most retailers started to have an online presence. So I know a lot of people say, I only buy things through Amazon. Yeah, probably not anymore. And in fact, we go to many retailers online right now to buy things. And that, in this time frame, is really, really what was happening. The other huge change at this time was that YouTube started 2005. 2 years later, 2007. Bought by who? Google. Yeah, heard of them. For a couple $2 billion. 2 years into it. Hulu started 2007 at the same time, invested in by, I think, NBC and a few others to prosecute the online or streaming video market. Netflix is the most interesting example to me. The Netflix folks have been in business for years and years. Who remembers getting a Netflix DVD mailed to your house, right? Everybody does, right? So what happened in 2007 to make Netflix switch to online distribution? Cost. It turns out that probably a year or so prior to that, that the cost curve for distributing a movie online got cheaper than mailing that same movie via FedEx. And once that happened, the whole Netflix and streaming media model changed, and it changed, I mean, like that. And that was a pretty profound demand driver. The other one that doesn't get a lot of airtime is the fact that networking became really important to the financial markets. The notion that high-frequency trading represented more than 50% of all trades in the market in 2010. Reason why computing had gotten, the price per compute had gotten cheap enough, sensitivity around delay. These trades require super low latency across the backplane of a computer, into memory, into disk. And it turns out, what's the thing that has the most latency? The network. So latency to high-frequency traders that were trying to arbitrage between exchanges really started to matter. And a couple of folks, James Barksdale, who started Netscape, and a guy named Dan Spivey, who was a trader, secretly went off and raised a bunch of money, and in 2009 started to construct an 827-mile network through places where there wasn't a whole lot of network, mainly western Pennsylvania, drilled through rock, all kinds of things to build the spread network. And the spread network went into business around 2010 with a handful of anchor high-frequency traders as customers. And the rest is history. We actually bought this network this year. Data centers. Now, anybody in the room that I would challenge you if you realized that data centers were going to be as important as they were in 2004. If you remember, most of the data center companies went through bankruptcy. I love, and now granted they're a competitor, but I think the Equinix folks did an amazing job. That's a picture of their stock. Their stock went from 44 to 440 bucks in 10 years. They absolutely took advantage of the fact that if you started a business, how many people would build their own data center today if you were starting your business today? I think the answer is no one. Absolutely no one. This is an incredibly important trend, and one that I think is going to last decades as enterprises unwind the data centers that they've built and do technology refresh and start to build inside data centers. Traffic growth. You know, I'm an internet guy by trade or by training, and I can't tell you how many of these charts I've either drawn that were historical or predictions. All the historical ones are what they are. All the predictions are wrong, completely wrong. But this is a historical one, and there are so many times that I think we want to do a gut check. Gosh, is demand real? And this is obviously a very simple graph, but when you think about the article that I showed from the Wall Street Journal in 2005. And in 2005, there was this supposed glut of fiber and glut of capacity, lit fiber capacity. Now, I promise you that any industry would die for this sort of demand. A 43% CAGR is an incredibly strong number. And any industry would fight to have this kind of demand profile. Now, it's not what it was in the early 90s, where it was doubling every 12, 18 months. But that's kind of a law of small numbers problem. This is when everyone is using the infrastructure. So we had in this time, we had an incredibly strong demand. And then mobile infrastructure started to expand. Now, all the carriers had antennas on macro towers. That there's no doubt, all of that infrastructure was there. But what happened was that all the infrastructure was served by copper. It was served by T1s, 2 T1s, 3 T1s. And then, go back to point one, the iPhone shows up, Android phones show up, suddenly data becomes incredibly important to the mobile infrastructure, which mostly was there to carry voice and text at the time, and the carriers had to scramble. So when you had a 2 or 3 T1 network to a macro tower, suddenly you needed 30, 40, 50 megs of bandwidth to each one of those macro towers. Today, we talk about 100 meg, 500 meg, a gig, 10 gig to each of the towers. And that, I think, will continue. And consolidation began in earnest at this time. In 2006, 2007, many companies started to consolidate infrastructure. This just so happens to be Zayo's timeline of infrastructure purchased in North America. From 2007 to 2018, there were more networks bought in Europe as well, and there were others, my former employer, one who was also buying networks at that time. So consolidation began in earnest at this time. So as you kind of think about, let's move forward a little bit and think about communications and commerce. The one, for my level 3 colleagues and Zayo colleagues that have had to hear me talk before, you'll get tired of me hearing me talk about this point, but I think it is an unnoticed point in technology. For the longest time, in the 80s and 90s, we used to look to business for technology trends. We'd look in at enterprise and say, all right, what are the employees in the enterprise doing, using technology for, what's happening? And I would propose that in 2008, 2009, we stopped doing that. And we started looking at the consumer. And you think about it, looking at the consumer pointed at all the trends. It pointed at mobile and tablet usage. It pointed at, frankly, today, as you see desktops and PC usage shrink, it's because of the consumerization of IT. And that trend really started to take hold. So here's a question. So this is the audience participation part. So how many people have one device, one mobile device? I hope everyone raises their hand, and keep your hand up. Come on. How many people have 2? How many people have 3? How many people have 4? All right, whoever has their hand up has a problem. But the fact is, we have suddenly become device hungry as individuals. So the same question, but now think about your house. So I'll let you think about it for a second. So what counts in your house? All the devices that you already had, plus your kids, plus your spouse, significant other, plus your smart TVs, plus all of your audio devices, plus if you live in a new home, maybe your light switches and thermometers. So I won't count by one, but I'm sure everyone could start with 10. So raise your hand at 10. 20. 30. 40. Okay, I don't see, nobody has a problem at 40. I think I might have more than 40, so maybe I'm the only one with a problem. But that's just a matter of time. And when we think about what's happening right now, and you hear the increase in devices and the number of connected devices, this is an incredible trend for us to follow. Social media, the same thing. I told you this is the audience participation. So 10 years ago, think about what you had as social media. How many people had a MySpace account? Wow, I can't believe you guys admitted that. How many people had a social media account 10 years ago? Yeah, probably half the room. And today, everyone has some sort of social media account. I won't embarrass the MySpace people anymore. But as a generational thing, that's another thing that we aren't exactly the demographic of usage going forward, right? We're a bit of the, some people may be in the room, but I'm certainly not. I look at my kids for that. And the demographic of usage around social media and number of devices is one that we need to continue to watch. Streaming media, even though started in earnest in 2007, I would offer that today we are just starting to see the effects of streaming media and what can really happen. I remember getting into an argument with somebody at Fox many, many years ago about, oh, you'll never be able, never, always the hot button word for a technology guy, never be able to show the Super Bowl over the internet. Anybody believe that right now? I don't. I think it's a foregone conclusion. So I believe that we're in the middle of streaming media becoming even more prevalent. So this is, for those that follow Mary Meeker, Mary does, in my opinion, one of the most amazing jobs every year of showing what are the internet trends. She's a principal at Kleiner Perkins, and it's called the, Internet Trends Report. And this is an interesting chart, and it's from 2008 to 2017, the daily hours spent by, with digital media per adult. And as you can see, no surprise, 2.7 hours to 5.9 hours. The important part is that the mobile device usage is going up, and your other device usage is going up, and your PC and laptop is going down. No surprise. But I think we're just at the very, very beginning. The fact that we're seeing both digital media usage go up, I'm not sure when it stops, but I'm guessing it probably isn't going to stop just yet, and that we're spending, this is no surprise, right? Look at your kids. If you have kids, they're on their mobile device all the time, and that's how they're consuming. Again, social media, we're seeing usage in social media up by 50%. I don't know how much more this grows, but that's a pretty impressive number in just 5 years. And then the growth in cloud computing. So here's a question. What's bigger, Salesforce.com or AWS? Just AWS. Anyone want to guess? Salesforce or AWS? Come on, get Salesforce. AWS by double. AWS is a $17.5 billion business right now, from nothing in 2007. So in 10 years, they've built this incredible piece of infrastructure and business. I'd ask you again, if you were starting a company, would you buy your own servers? I wouldn't. I'd look to the cloud and use the cloud for everything I possibly could. By the way, AWS is the 5th largest software company in the world right now. The 5th largest. That includes Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, SAP, and then AWS. Pretty impressive for 10 years, huh? And software, I actually also think that another trend inside AWS is one that's not quite noticed. If you look at, I forget, Morgan Stanley, I think, does another report on the cloud guys. And if you look at AWS, there's a portion of AWS which is just virtual machine outsourcing. And that actually has started to flatten a little bit. And the reason why I believe it's flattened is because enterprises are turning more to buying finished software platforms as their online capability, as opposed to buying a virtualized server and then putting software on it. And I think that's a big trend. I look at our company. Our company, Zayo, runs on Salesforce.com, Workday, and the Google Suite. And that's it. All cloud-based software platforms. We have 4,000 employees. During this time, we've seen broadband increase, tripled in just 3 years, 2011, 2014. If you took the same measurement now, we're probably in the 50s or so. Market expansion is happening at this time. This is a picture of our network in 2014, our Metro Dallas network in 2014. As we started to win business with wireless carriers, we won an E-rate, which is a school district deal in the greater Dallas metro area, and won more business enterprise. We built more network. This is just 4 years. We've tripled the size of our Dallas network in just 4 years. So looking forward, this notion of cord cutting is something that I won't ask this room because we're all kind of the same demographic, but I think if you go one generation next, there aren't many of my kids don't buy cable. They buy an internet service, they watch everything online. And that is a trend that maybe we don't feel right now across all of cable, but it is one that's going to happen. This notion of a smart home, we're just a few home building cycles away where everything in your home that draws electricity will be connected. Now, I want credit for making it through what is, I believe, 33 or 34 slides and 35 minutes without mentioning IoT. So, round of applause. No, just kidding. Thank you. I do think that IoT and big data actually have a place in the discussion mainly because technology has enabled this and cost has enabled it. Why do we talk about IoT so much? Are the sensors suddenly so much smarter and no. The reason why is that the cost of networking a device has dropped exponentially over the last 20 years. And now you can buy a super cheap NPU that's inside of an IoT device, and you can turn it on and off with a wireless signal, and the battery gets managed, and all this cool stuff happened. You couldn't have done that 10 years ago because technology was too expensive. Same thing with big data. There's a ton more data, but are the algorithms that much smarter? Maybe, but I would offer that what's happened is the cost of compute and the cost of storage and the cost of networking has dropped so much that we can afford to do the things that we're doing today with big data. Does anybody work for Morgan Stanley here? Okay, good. So I'm going to poke fun at this because I actually like the numbers on this slide a lot, except it's, I would say bold is probably the best way to say anyone who's willing to make a 32-year prediction in the future, which is what this is. So the reason why I like it is because I think it's directionally correct. Do I think Morgan Stanley can predict 32 years in the future? Probably not. That's like sitting in 1976 looking at today and saying, I know exactly how that internet thing is going to work out. Yeah, probably not. But what I find instructive is today an iPhone generates between 1 and 2 gigabytes of data a month. An AV, an autonomous vehicle, will generate 40 terabytes per hour, which I think is like 30,000 gigabytes per month or something crazy. I have no idea if those numbers are right. What I am sure of is that your car is going to generate a ton of data. I'm also pretty sure that the wireless usage, this is also correct, that if today an iPhone generates 1 to 5 gigabytes per month, that your car could generate 50 to 500 gigabytes per month. I think those all kind of make sense when you look at the number of sensors that sit inside a car. The demand on networks, specifically wireless networks, as well as fiber networks that serve wireless networks, will be profound just from AV alone. Now, for those that have network in New York, this is not a prediction of how dense the fiber network. This is illustrative. But The densification of wireless networks, which everyone knows about, is, I don't think, overhyped right now. I actually think it might be underhyped. Today, there's probably, if there are 4 carriers, say they all have 40,000 macro towers per carrier, and there's some overlap. So let's say there's 100 to 120,000 macro towers in the US. Ask anyone of the 4 carriers, and they'd tell you that in the next 5, 8 years, that they will grow their 5G network to be 5 to 10 times that size. So between 500 and 1.2 million small cells throughout the country. That's a pretty massive deployment, and one that will be a challenge for us all. The nice thing is that every one of those will need fiber. And another point that I think is starting to get a little bit of time is that edge computing. The idea that today we have data centers, they sit somewhere in the middle of cities, but that may not be good enough as we build out networks that have 1 million endpoints. It may require us to have computing much closer to the edge. Now, these won't be 200,000 square foot data centers. They'll probably be huts, or what moral equivalent of a trailer on a tractor trailer. But we're going to have to push computing out to the edge more than we do today. And I like the Cisco, for those that ever take a look at the Cisco V&I report, I think it's very good. I think Cisco has done a really good job over the years. And this is their prediction for mobile traffic over the next 4 years or so. And if you remember, the historical CAGR was around 43%. Cisco would say it's going to accelerate a little bit to, 47%. But not wildly different, a little bit stronger. I believe this might be a little bit understated. The nice thing is, and yeah, I'm a fiber guy, but I do think this means that it's just more fiber will be needed. And that's what we've seen. We're deploying more and more fiber, higher fiber count. That's happening right now. That's not a prediction. That's what's happening right now. So what? Lots of data, maybe a joke or two. I think there are a few takeaways as we reflect on our industry, what's happening. One is that consumer demand is absolutely real. Whether you look at end users, more people, more usage, more devices, more video, higher speeds. I think I would struggle arguing against the fact that demand is real and long-lasting. Sorry, my clicker's not working. Infrastructure is more accessible than ever. And what I mean by that is, as we get asked a lot by investors and customers, why do we like infrastructure so much? And my answer is, I've always liked infrastructure. I think there are clearly obvious reasons. But what has happened in the last few years is that infrastructure has become more accessible to a different set of users. And what I mean by that is, think about, we'll use fiber as an example. If you wanted to buy fiber 10 years ago, you probably were a carrier, maybe one of the hyperscale guys, but that was it. And you had expertise in optical networking, and you had folks who understood how all this complicated stuff works. What I mean by infrastructure being more available is that technology has made it simpler for other types of customers to take advantage of infrastructure. So today, if I'm a bank and I want to buy dark fiber, I don't have to hire a whole bunch of optical engineers to go do that. I go to the Cisco catalog, I find a mid-range optic, I plug it into my router, I do it on the other end. I don't have to know anything else. That's a fundamental change in infrastructure, and technology has allowed us to do that. Densification will be long-lasting. No question. Absolutely no question for at least until I retire. Densification is going to matter to the wireless guys. We aren't making more spectrum, and if we are, it's on the margin. And so as users increase the number of devices, the amount of bandwidth, the wireless carriers will have to densify this. Their only solution is to make cells smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And the nice thing about that is as you make cells smaller and smaller and smaller, you have to bring fiber to them. That's why we like infrastructure. Construction techniques, they're going to have to change. We today are not employing every same construction technique. We have finally figured out plastic pipes are a good idea, but things like micro-trenching and micro-ducting and putting small cells on any place we possibly can, sides of buildings, on top of streetlights, strand mounting them to cable. These will all be more and more important to us. Things like permitting, siting, and serving the underserved with more infrastructure is something that we will have to do. And then finally, how many people have heard of the traveling salesman problem? All right, there is maybe 10 people that raised their hand. So the traveling salesman problem is an optimization problem. If you ever heard of operations research, and it's kind of simply stated, I'll make sure I don't screw it up, it is what is the optimal route between a given set of cities for a salesman to take and return home? Sounds simple, right? Turns out in your optimization world, that's called an NP-complete problem. It has more solutions than stars in the universe. And there are different ways to solve it. And when you think about how we place fiber networks today, we usually have folks figure out, okay, there's a street here, maybe I'll take it this way, maybe I'll take it that way. Does anybody in the room think that we as an industry are super sophisticated into how we actually build our fiber networks? I don't. I think we have a huge opportunity to get a whole lot smarter as to how we build them. So one final thought. So this is Zayo's mission. And I kind of, as I was thinking about today and all the folks in the room, I was thinking, you know, our mission kind of is similar to what everybody in the room is, which is to accelerate our customers' capabilities to advance freedom and prosperity by providing enormous high-quality bandwidth. I think it's actually kind of fitting for us all. So with that, thank you very much.
Are you ready for questions?
I am.
Fantastic.
With a drink of water.
Thank you so much. Well, we got a lot of great questions while you were up here.
And just so you know, we are a handful of days from our earnings announcement, so I will stay away from anything that causes me regulatory issues.
Or pain, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the first one. Tell me if you're willing to answer it.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, I gotta. Okay, every 5G lecture mentions self-driving cars with lower latency. What else will 5G bring to the consumer besides self-driving cars? Here's the Morgan Stanley question.
Well, I got to tell you that I kind of agree with the sentiment of the question, which is, and honestly, I still am a little skeptical that 5G is everything that you read about. So if you take it at its face value, 5G is more bandwidth, lower latency, you know, pick all the other things. It's also a fixed wireline competitive replacement. It's also going to enable more spectrum, things like much, much higher frequency, which has horrible propagation. It's also going to allow for more microwave, tons of different things. And I think the question is right that I don't think it's just about self-driving cars for sure. I do think at the end of the day it is higher speeds to your handsets, probably more coverage via mobility, and maybe a fixed wireline replacement. And I say maybe.
Interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, go ahead.
The question is mobile backhaul. Do you think service providers will shift from lit service to dark fiber to provide backhaul services to cell sites?
Yes.
Okay, then.
No, yeah, absolutely, and we're seeing that. The original, and not every carrier is the same, but but as I mentioned, the shift from copper to optical, from T1s to Ethernet, that has happened. And now folks are saying, gosh, do I still want lit services, or do I want to have dark services? I'll put equipment on the end, I'll do passive DWDM. There are lots of solutions. So yeah, I think there is a trend. Now, not all of them are taking that trend, and not all of them are deciding the same for macros versus small cells and 5G nodes. So I'd say there's differences. Go ahead.
What impact do you believe the trend toward mobile device growth and increased wireless usage has on investing in the traditional wireline network over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think they go hand in hand. You can't, we need to, as an industry, get over the fact that we think somehow there's a trade between wireless and fiber.
Could you say that again?
There is not, yeah, there is not a trade between wireless and fiber, in my opinion. As we build out more and more wireless infrastructure, that wireless infrastructure needs to be connected. And so the need for the wireline network is expanding, not contracting, even if there's fixed line replacements. But it's funny, I hate the word last, or the words last mile, because that implies that it's this really, really, really long loop from the wire center to somebody's home. And in fact, it's not that anymore at all. It's the last like 300 feet or 500 feet. And that may be served by 5G technology, probably will in many, many, many cases. But that other 4,780 feet from that 500 feet is going to be wired, and is most likely going to be fiber.
Great point. Oh, wait, I want to do this one first. They're coming in so fast. Give me a second. This one is really good. Would you guys stop texting for a second? I'm sorry. How do we bring rural communities into the connected world so many of us take for granted?
So it's a tough question, and look, we're a for-profit entity as most people are in the world. So it's a tough business case building to places where few are. But I would tell you that I think the government E-rate program is one that has really brought a lot of network to school districts, and therefore made wireless carriers be able to piggyback on top of that infrastructure, build out more and more infrastructure on top of that. So something like E-rate, I believe, has done a really good job in bringing more and more high-speed networking to rural communities. I'm trying to be crisp.
Very crisp. I think you were really hard, but let's see.
Go ahead.
Will Zayo be laying fiber directly to all the 5G? Did you like that? All the 5G towers?
All 5G towers. God, I hope so, but I'm kind of doubting that we'll probably to get to all million too. Look, it's a huge demand set, and one that we need to participate in, and one that others will participate in, and it's a business we like a lot.
Wow, this is so cool.
Go ahead.
Do you think coherent transmission will be more prevalent as well as a solution with the increasing bandwidth consumption?
So coherent detection is, for those that aren't optics people, it was sort of the next great, you used to kind of look at light and say, was it on or off? Now we've taken, as technology has evolved and processing has gotten faster and cheaper, we've taken the ability to modulate on one end using kind of old radio techniques and detect it on the other using old radio techniques called coherent detection, and that's become very prevalent. The answer is, I don't know. I think that whatever drops the cost to move a bit will win. CD definitely did in this time frame. It was the huge jump down, the next jump down in technology. There will be others. Seems reasonable, but who knows?
I want to make sure I'm sticking to time. Wow. That one was too hard, guys,
Yeah.
sorry.
That one was super esoteric.
Whoa. One more question. Okay, this is the last question.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. The question is, what is the next big thing in OSP implementation?
Flat rate pricing. Now, it's funny because a few of my friends are in the business, and we joke, but not really, that the economics of the outside plant don't always follow the economics that we turn to our customers, who are our big customers, and sometimes want things like more flat rate type. And it's a tough thing for us all to figure out. I think working together and really being transparent about where outside plant implementation can have, lower cost, everybody still makes money, and we get to pass that on or keep some for ourselves as well, is something that's really important right now. And I don't know what the next big construction technique. I like the micro-trenching thing a lot. I will tell you that I've been talking about it for 10 years, and I'm still kind of disappointed as to how far along we are as an industry. Maybe that's because of municipalities and cities not really allowing us to do it as much. Maybe it's for other reasons, but I'm looking forward to the day where you all will give us flat rate pricing across the U.S., so thank you.
Thank you so much.